So we're hearing more rumblings about potential Navy action against Venezuela by the United States. This comes from now an admiral, not just Trump, sort of musing on an open mic. Admiral Fowler specifically was giving some very cryptic statements out recently, saying how the Navy is ready to act at any time, and oh yeah, we're the most powerful Navy in the world. There's really nothing that Venezuela could do to stop us. And he wouldn't say stop them from doing what? What does he plan to do? They're not revealing that. I guess he's just trying at this point to intimidate the Venezuelans, I would assume. However, if there really was a strong imminent military action that was coming soon, one would think that they would not want to telegraph that. Perhaps this is some kind of negotiating tactic to where they're trying to make the Venezuelans feel that some sort of invasion or blockade is imminent, and that will somehow help them, get what they want. However, there's really been nothing happening with Venezuela for quite a few months. Remember that Juan Guaido guy? Doesn't that feel like a year ago or 2 years ago? That was only a few months ago that the U.S. was backing him, and nothing's really happened since. He hasn't gained any power. Maduro is still in charge. So I really have trouble trying to figure out what exactly the U.S. is still doing with respect to Venezuela, because it seems to me like they lost their first putsch, and now things are, they're just kind of floundering. Now, many people are speculating that what Fowler was saying was, in fact, telegraphing that there would be some sort of imminent action by the Navy. But, considering that it's just the Navy that is saying this, that he was only referring to the Navy, that he did not use the term U.S. military, he was just saying U.S. Navy, that seems pretty clear that he's talking about some kind of a blockade of Venezuela, a medieval-style siege where you just choke off whatever the enemy is, and you wait for them to starve out. Now, this is a very potent tactic if you're just trying to neutralize a threat, or if you're trying to, if you're trying to take down a government. However, the goal in Venezuela, from what I understand, is not just that Maduro would be gone. It's actually regime change, meaning they go from one regime to another. What they're doing, the blockade there, will destroy Maduro's regime, but it won't necessarily put a new regime in place. There is by no means any guarantee that if Maduro falls because, his government is choked out and his whole country is, collapses, that there will somehow be some pro-U.S. leader that's going to step forward and take over power. Who could seize power if Maduro falls? Because if Maduro falls, it's not just him that would collapse, it would be the whole state. And the state would collapse because the country is collapsed, the society is collapsed. There would be no economy, there would be no trade. They can't get anything in or out. The toilet paper shortages would, turn into total blackouts and droughts. And so I think that a blockade would be, the sloppiest and worst thing that the U.S. could do, even if, you assume that their goal is to put in some kind of, new regime. All they're going to do is destabilize Venezuela. They're not going to put anyone new in place. I mean, really, if you want to impose a regime on a country, you have to invade it, overthrow the old regime, and then put a new one in power, and then leave your troops there to protect that regime, which is what, the U.S. has done in a lot of countries. You essentially have to nation build, which, as we all know, doesn't work particularly well when the U.S. tries that. It didn't go very well in Iraq, and there's no real reason to believe why it would go particularly well in Venezuela, particularly if Venezuela collapses as a direct result of U.S. action. As of right now, Venezuela is poor. They're not doing well, but they have not collapsed as a society. That is the whole point of the blockade. If there wasn't something to destroy, there would be no reason to blockade Venezuela. And so if you do that, do you really think the people are going to, look at the U.S. as liberators? They're going to say, no, you're the folks that tried to starve us out and that, completely destroyed our society. And so whoever the new guy is that takes over, if eventually someone does effectively seize power and Venezuela doesn't just devolve into a long-running civil war like, Yugoslavia or Lebanon or something, well, that guy is probably not going to like America. In fact, whatever the warring factions are, if there was some kind of civil war to replace Maduro's government after it collapses, I can't imagine that any of those sides would be particularly pro-American. I mean, we've seen that Mr. Guaido who is the pro-American guy there, wasn't able to muster much military support when he attempted a coup. That tells me that even if maybe the entire military isn't a big fan of Maduro himself, none of them are siding with the U.S. because if they had, they would have sided with Guaido, because Guaido was an avatar of the U.S. at that point. Now, of course, if the U.S. does go through with this blockade and they do effectively destabilize Venezuela, they will create an unprecedented refugee crisis, as I've said many times, on the American supercontinent. You will see folks from Venezuela flood out into the other countries, which are already filled with Venezuelan refugees. And then eventually they'll have to keep moving along with probably refugees from the countries that they, flood into. I'm sure that if a bunch of Venezuelans, millions of Venezuelans flood into Colombia, that you're going to have Colombians who are trying to flee Colombia to go north, and then you're just going to have this cascading waterfall, or sort of like a mudslide of human beings coming from South America up into North America through the U.S.-Mexico border, all being pushed by this conflict that was created, this conflagration that was created in Venezuela by this blockade policy. And of course, for Mr. No illegal immigration president, Mr. Trump, this won't look particularly good. If he causes a crisis that sends millions of people up through the southern border that he is not going to be able to deal with, that he probably will have to, take in, because he can't just, put the troops on the border and block 1 million people if they flood all at once. This would be an unmitigated disaster for the Trump presidency. Trump ran on no more illegal immigration and no more stupid wars, and what we would have in this case would be one more stupid war and millions of illegal immigrants. So I hope for the president's sake that this admiral is just bluffing, and that this is just some sort of negotiating tactic that they're using against Maduro, which, God knows why they're trying to negotiate with Maduro. What do they have to negotiate over? None of the U.S.'s business, frankly, but if you gained anything of value out of this video, please do like and share. That really is the only way that I have that I see that my content really gets around. I have a very small percentage of my views come from recommendations in people's feeds and stuff like that. So really sharing and subscribing is the only way that anyone's going to see my content. So with that said, I hope you folks have a great day, and I'll see you back here tomorrow.